Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this webinar today, which is a taster session from some of our work. So let me put up the slide. Here we go. We're going to particularly talk this morning about setting great expectations, setting smart objectives, setting goals, however you want to name it. It is all about how we're going to make sure that people understand what is expected of them. If you have questions as we go along, please do put them in the chat. I might be able to pick some of them up as we go along. Otherwise, I will pick up questions at the end. So off we go. Oh, a quick note. If you joined this webinar from a link that someone else shared with you that we didn't send to you direct, can you leave us your email address so we can send you the slides? If you came via someone else's link, we don't know who you are. So you're very welcome. But if you want the slides, you will need to leave us your email link. All right, let's get going. Very briefly, for those of you who don't know us, these are the kind of people that we work with. We tend to work with organisations where people have been promoted into managerial positions on the basis of their academic, technical or professional expertise, and not because they are great people managers. So we look at all aspects of how we manage performance, right from the moment of what do we expect from people through to managing poor performance. We do lots of training, lots of consulting, designing processes, all sorts of things in different ways for different people. That's all you're going to hear around advertising. We're now going to hit into the main part of the content. So we've got two real things today. We're going to look at an activity called re-expression, which we have found is really helpful when we want people to explore what strategic organisational objectives mean to them in practice. We know from talking to our clients that some of the biggest challenges that people have is how do they turn strategy, these big things that often people don't think are anything to do with them, into action. And the activities that we'll be looking at, we tend to use on what I call a mid-sized organisation. So mid-sized for us is kind of 500 to 5,000, where you've got strategy. Not everybody's talking to the boss every day if you're in a small or a micro organisation, but it's perhaps a fairly manageable activity as opposed to if you're in a huge global organisation where it's more difficult. So I'm Hedda. I am the Managing Director of 3C, and my colleague Helen Eads, you will see, is also on the list. If you want to send your email address privately, do send that to Helen as we go along. All right, let's carry on. So here is a word called engagement. And in the re-expression activity, what we do is ask people to take a word that we all think we understand and we re-express it in different ways. So you can do this in a face-to-face environment, or you can do it virtually. And we can do it virtually now. And I'm going to put some suggestions up. And if you would like to put some suggestions up, you are absolutely welcome to do. That would be lovely. But for example, engagement could mean getting married. So if you want to open your chat, you could put up there, okay, and I put getting mattress there because I misspelt things. Engagement could mean getting married. It could mean listening. So if you would like to just take a moment and think, what would engagement mean to you? And if you'd like to share some thoughts in chat, this is all private, it's only an activity, then absolutely do share some ideas of what the word engagement might mean to you. And I'll put up a couple more as we go along. Don't worry about what anyone else writes. You can just add other things. You don't have to do this, but this is an example of how I make this activity work in a virtual environment. Thank you, Eleanor. Connection, that's a great word. Yeah, Bronwyn, interested and keen to be involved. If anybody wants to put any more up, when you run this in a virtual environment, it can often be, I'll give people a minute or maybe max 2 minutes to write their words up. Ironically, if you're doing it in a face-to-face environment, you tend to do it a bit longer. You can either do it in a group working on a flip chart, or you can do it on post-it notes. Brilliant. All right. So when we then think about engagement, we begin to get all of these words. Now, I'm not going to do the next part of the activity with you, but what I would do if we were in a classroom environment is I would invite some of you who have put some language up there to then talk through with us, what does that actually mean? Some of the slide is covered. Helen is telling me some of the slide is covered. So hopefully you can see some of this. I'm just going to take out my participant slide and put this up here. So hopefully you can all see enough of the slide at this moment. If you can't see the slide, please do drop me. I've got my chat open on top of the slide so that I can see it. All right, so we've got some different means of talking about the word engagement. And then what we do is explore what those means. So on my next slide here, you can see a number of words that come up regularly when we talk about engagement. And I see that some of you have committed this. And Nikki, you put commitment up there, and there is committed. Somebody else has put allegiance. Elaine, I noticed online you put togetherness, interested to be involved. So what we then do is explore with people. It's the chat that is slightly over the slide. I think that's true. Thanks, Nikki. But I'm looking at your chat too, so I'm just going to move it off slightly to the slide here so that, oh, no, I haven't done that at all, just so that I can see what you're giving to me. All right, so what we then do is we ask people to take their alternative words and start to explore some ideas. So let's take the word listening. If we were going to think about how we might listen to increase engagement, then we can explore with people, how could we use better listening to think about engagement? And for example, I'm going to take the word that we already got up there. Nikki, you put up the word commitment. So I'm going to ask people, how might we explore that word commitment to think about engagement? So for example, we might think about it as turning up to meetings on time. All right. So if you run meetings and you're always late, that indicates to people that they're not important. So I put up there that commitment or being committed could mean turning up to meetings on time. All right. It could mean making time to talk to each member of the team. All right, it might mean something around that says, I'm committed to each person here. I'm going to make sure that I have a chance to talk to each person, so making a personal commitment. So if any of you have got some ideas around how might we use the word commitment or committed to increase engagement, you can share them here now. I'd love to see your thoughts. Don't feel pressurized to do that. But if you're running this as a virtual session, this is where you'd really start to explore that. Eleanor, that's lovely. Feeling loyalty. Yes, a commitment has that phrase of loyalty, doesn't it? And how we might show that if we're more committed to people, we will feel more loyal to them. Bronwyn, I think that's interesting too, isn't it? So we can build trust by committing ourselves to talking to people. So there are lots and lots of ways, and you're beginning to share some really good ideas. And I'm sure that you can see in a session what you would be doing is really doing that. Goals even. Yes, Cara, being committed to delivering your goals. And also there's that flip side, isn't it? It's that thing of don't promise what you can't deliver. But once you have promised something, then do deliver it. So it's all about managing the difference between what we say we're going to do and what we are actually going to do. All right, so depending on how long you want to spend exploring these words, you can go through different ones. So a classic example is if you're thinking about leadership and you put up the line that says, you can put up a question that says, what does leadership mean? And you might get people struggling to be very erudite or very thoughtful in what they do. And instead, if you put up the word leadership and ask them to put all other words that they think mean leadership, and then get them to explore those words specifically, what you get is something much more real. You get something that people are much more committed to, and that they can then go, all right, I understand that the word leadership might mean doing what I say, or it might mean taking all views into account, or it might mean making better decisions rather than trying to do, as we often sometimes get if we're not careful, kind of very theoretical views of what leadership is. So re-expression is a really, really powerful technique for getting people to explore words that we all think we mean. We know what they mean, but often we have very different views of it. Customer service is another great one. If you put up the words customer service, then and ask people what that means, you'll very quickly unpick that people have very, very, very different ideas of what customer service might mean. All right, so how do we take this and use it into setting objectives? So the clear point of setting objectives is to write a goal that enables you to evaluate yourself and allow others to evaluate what you do as well. So we need goals that enable us to think, all right, how are we doing? So we can write, for example, you might absolutely classically get a goal that says, how are we going to increase engagement in the organization? And we're going to look at that in a minute. So you might have a goal to increase levels of engagement. And if you're in HR, that might absolutely be one of your goals. Before we get into looking at engagement, we're going to think about how we need to unpack the meaning of goals. So I'm going to give you two examples here. And first, we're going to talk about a goal around health and safety. And we're going to use this model because it's very easy to see the problem when you talk about zero accidents, but it often shows up in many, many other areas. So if I've got to have zero accidents, which is a health and safety goal typically, I might say, what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to take steps to avoid accidents. All right, that's what I'm going to do. All right, the goal is to have zero accidents. I'm going to take steps to avoid accidents. And my measure might be the number of accidents. The target is zero accidents, but the measure is the actual number of accidents. And the outcome, well, who knows what will happen? Maybe the outcome is that there aren't any accidents, or maybe it isn't. But if we've written a goal like that, that says the target is zero accidents, our measure is the number of accidents, and our actions are to avoid accidents, then what we've written is we don't want accidents, so we're not going to have any accidents. And that kind of goal really, really, really doesn't help. Technically, it's smart. Technically, it is smart. It's specific, it's measurable, it's time-bound, all of those things. But it's actually a very stupid goal. Now, when it's written like that, you can see the problem. But I see so many goals or objectives that are written in this way, that are written like, we want to improve levels of engagement, so we're going to take steps to improve engagement. The measure will be how much engagement is improved, and the outcome should be improved engagement. And that may be technically true, but it's no use in evaluating how well you're doing, because whether or not there are zero accidents in this approach is nothing to do with you, really. So here's a better approach. The better approach is not to make the goal the zero accidents, but to make the goal the safe environment. All right. And that's a really important thing. Now, a safe environment should lead to far fewer accidents. And that leads you to write something different. So here we've got, so if I want a safe environment, now my actions are all about how do I create a safe environment? And I've put some examples up here about putting up safety notices, providing training, conducting risk reviews. All right, lots of things that we could do that will create a safe environment. We might then have our measures here, and our measures are measures of our actions. So now, here are some simple measures. Have I got safety notices in place? Have we done the training? Did we complete a risk review and implement its recommendations? So now I've got a goal that is aimed at the same thing, having zero accidents, but is actually focused on the actions that lead to that. And so what you hopefully then get is a reduction in accidents, and maybe we get a reduction in accidents to zero. But if we don't get zero accidents, we've got some way of going back and looking at what we did and saying, what more could we have done, or what didn't we do that helped us with that accident? Now, when you look at this, it looks really obvious, right? And that's partly why I use this example of how bonkers it is. This is a SMART goal, but this is now useful, all right? It's smart in this, it's very specific, it's measurable, right? It's obviously targeted and all the rest of it. But now it's also practical because I can now use this to evaluate, did I do what was expected of me? Was the outcome clearly in some way related to what I did, or does there need to be a different outcome? So if we take that idea now, so we've now got two ideas, right? We've got an idea that says we need to explore some of the more challenging words in our strategic goals. And then we need to write those strategic goals, not as the target, which is to have zero accidents, but as what will lead to the target, in this case, a safe environment. So that's when we come to strategy, that's the number one thing that your managers need to do. They need to take the strategic objectives and they need to rewrite that as what conditions do they need to create that will deliver that strategic objective. So we're now going to look briefly at improve employee engagement. So we can absolutely imagine that there's a strategic objective for an organization that says, let's improve employee engagement. All right. And it says we will aim to have employee engagement that is best in class across this organization. Sorry, not across the organization, across the sector or in our area, or a 50% improvement on last time. And it's very easy to write something that says, we will lift employee engagement by 50%, right? And then somebody gets a goal that says you are to lift employee engagement by 50%. And then at the end of it, it says the outcome of that, the measure is how much have you lifted employee engagement by, and the outcome is whatever it is, how much you actually did lift engagement by. But what we've now explored is we can unpick what employee engagement means. And I've chosen 3 words here that we got: listening, deeper relationships, trust. But as you said, we got commitment. There are all those different words. And then you have a conversation with your colleague. So let's take the word listening. So you might talk about who is being heard, who are we listening to, who is making the judgments about what is heard and what isn't heard. And therefore, I could take some actions purely around listening that might be measurable. So one of my actions might be, I will have listening sessions with, a number of our clients, or I will look at customer surveys and understand more deeply what that is telling me, so that you are able to think about, how do I listen? How do I ensure people are heard? And think of specific actions around that you may be able to measure. Let's think about deeper relationships. Who needs deeper relationships with colleagues? Who is left out? So when you're talking to a colleague or you're thinking with a team, our overall goal is to improve employee engagement. We all know that having more meaningful relationships with colleagues improves engagement across the organization as a whole. Therefore, let us think as a team. Is there anyone in this team who might be being left out, who we might need to engage with further? Are there other teams that we should be engaging with? Are we working in silos? Do we need deeper relationships with other people? And maybe out of that comes specific actions that will drive deeper relationships that will then lead to some outcomes. Now, it's possible to just go, oh, all right, under your actions, let's have some virtual events, let's do some shared coffee, or let's have a coffee and cake session in the office or whatever. But those actions on their own, unless they're framed up in terms of this is helping us build deeper relationships, will be harder for you to assess, did those events make a difference, if you haven't worked out exactly what you're doing. And finally, I put up the example of trust, which I think several of you put up earlier on. What is currently reducing trust? You might look at what can we do to increase trust? Where are the trust issues? And again, what kind of activities can we take? So you could do all this virtually. As you can see, you can put people into little breakout rooms and get them to explore these ideas. You can use chat, as we've done here. You can use shared whiteboards, depending on the size of your group. If you're training a large group, I find breakout rooms can work very well. My general rule is 3 to 4 people in a breakout room so that everybody can be heard. You might want to do shared whiteboards, those of you who have that technology. So lots of ways you can do this virtually, as well as ways in which you can do this in a classroom. Looking at measures, I've put some initial examples. So very simple things you could put in: how many people have actually participated in shared events, how many people have been involved in some one-to-one personal conversations with people, what's the level of support for cross-functional events, all sorts of things that you can use to measure your actions, rather than try and go measure directly employee engagement. And then it's only on the outcome side that we look at, you know, did we actually increase employee engagement? Because probably, oh, let me shrink that down again. Probably you only measure your employee engagement formally once a year. So you have to look at other things that will help you assess whether or not engagement is improving. All right, so those are our main ideas, which is we take these words that are in strategic objectives that we all think we understand, but mean different things to different people. We unpick that, and we then sort them into things that we might actually pay attention to. We then create actions that will address those particular things. We can then measure those things, and then we can look at the outputs, which will link back to our overall strategic objective. So we use this a lot with organizations, and we find that this is a really helpful way for people to take strategic objectives and turn them into personal objectives. Okay, let me move on there. If you want to know more, I talk about this and other activities in my book, which is there. And you are welcome to either contact us to get the links to it, or we will send the links out with a slide share. And if you want to know more about any more of the content on that training, obviously you can find out loads more on our website. So there we go. That was a quick one round. We did that brilliantly in 23 minutes. So if anybody has any questions or would like to make any comments at this stage, you are very welcome. You can either send me a personal direct message, or you can send, let me put this on speaker view, or you can send me, send me a direct message there. Just a minute. I'm just trying to get myself onto speaker view here. Let me do this. All right. Great. Any questions coming through? Oh, here's one: timing. How long do those sessions take? All right. So how long should we spend training on goals? I've trained how to set goals in organizations in 2 hours and in whole days. I think the current modern trend is that it's hard to get people on whole day training programs. I think if you've got half a day, you can actually send even large groups of people out with ready written versions of goals for them to get signed off. So you can do that in half a day. We tend to teach the main bit of just these kind of techniques over about 90 minutes when we're working virtually. I think it probably takes longer in a classroom, probably takes a good session, an hour and a half to actually do it, plus all the stuff that goes around, you know, getting people in and out of a room. So I wouldn't normally teach this as a single module in the classroom. I'd combine it with something else into a half-day session. But you can teach this kind of material absolutely in half an hour, if you in 90 minutes if you're working virtually. If you've got a very big group, say more than 15, then it might take a bit longer because you want people to talk as much as they can. All right. Any other questions that anybody wants to put in here virtually? Okay, I'm going in that case to switch the recording off. Thank you all very much for joining. You are welcome to stay on now, and we can have a more personal discussion about any issues you are facing. Let me stop the recording.